Right. Well, we're on chapter 9 in Shyampur and Kasipur. Yeah, from the book Sri Sharada Devi and Her Divine Play by Swami Chaitanananda. And looking at Sri Sharada Devi as an incarnation of the divine, and kind of getting a feel for the worship of God as mother, the divine feminine. And we find it mostly in her character, mostly in the way that she treats everybody so kindly as her own children. That was her practice, was to see the whole world as her own children. Everybody was her child. And so she nurtured and took care of everyone. Here comes Tom. All right. And I'm trying my new setup. For those who are thinking, oh my gosh, what's happened? I got a new chair. It's causing more troubles than comfort at this point, though. All right. In Shyampur and Kasipur, truly, O Lord, you have assumed a human form and proclaimed the greatest mystery of religion. O Ramakrishna, I am devoid of devotion to you. Lord, please bestow your grace upon me always. Indeed. Oh, here comes Kamala. Ramakrishna performed his divine play in 3 acts. The first, 1836 to 1852, covers his early life in Karmarpur. The second act, 1852 to 1885, comprises his adult life in Calcutta and nearby Dakshineshwar. It was in Dakshineshwar that he practiced various sadhanas, attained illumination, and began to promulgate his divine mission. The third act, 1885 to 1886, encompasses the last months of his life at Shyampur in Calcutta and nearby Kasipur, where he brought his divine drama to its close and laid the foundation for the future Ramakrishna order. Oops, Dominique is here. Just a moment. All right. It was probably in the second week of October 1885 that Holy Mother arrived at the house in Shyampur to care for her ailing husband. She was beside her husband during the bad times as well as the good. Although she lived behind an impregnable veil of modesty, she had learned from the Master how to adapt to time, place, and person. Now she applied those teachings. Holy Mother took responsibility for preparing the Master's meals while she silently prayed for his recovery. On the 10th of November, 1885, the Master had another hemorrhage and his condition became critical. Mother suggested through Sharat, later Swami Sharadananda, that someone should pour cold water on the Master's head and put a wet towel on his abdomen. During her stay in Shyampur, Holy Mother went out only once. One evening, after cooking for the Master, she walked a mile with Yogin Ma and Golap Ma to see Balaram Basu's wife, who was ill. Balaram's family was very devoted to the Master and to the Holy Mother. All right, so here we've got the house in Shyampur, which is the top picture there. And then the bottom room, the attic room, which is now a shrine, is where Sharada Devi cooked Ramakrishna's meals. So in the attic room there. So you can still go see these places. I got to see them when I was over there in 2012. Actually, several times, 2012, 2001, and 1999. So there's that. All right. Balaram's family was very devoted to the Master and to Holy Mother. Swami Sharadananda presents a vivid picture of the Shyampur house, where the Master stayed for nearly 3 months. The Master lived upstairs in a spacious room called the parlor. To the north and south of the parlor are 2 verandas, the northern one larger than the southern. To the west of the parlor are 2 small rooms, one used by devotees who stayed overnight, and the other by Holy Mother. The visitor's room has a narrow veranda to the west. A staircase to the roof is at the eastern end of the corridor leading to the Master's room. At the top of those stairs, near the door to the roof, is a covered terrace about 6 feet by 6 feet in size. Holy Mother spent her days on that terrace, and there she cooked the special diet needed by the Master. It is really amazing how for 3 months she performed her duties, forgetting all personal inconveniences, while living in that single family house surrounded by men whom she did not know, as there was only one bathroom for everyone. She would get up before 3 a.m., perform her bathroom activities, and then silently go to the terrace on the second floor without anyone knowing. She would spend the whole day there. When the Master's meals were ready at regular times, she would send word downstairs through Swami Advaitananda or Swami Adbhutananda. At these times, the people were asked to leave so that she could bring the food to feed the Master, or we, the young disciples, would carry his meals to him if that was more convenient. At noon, Holy Mother would eat and rest on the terrace. At 11 p.m., when everyone else was asleep, she would leave that room and sleep in her bedroom on the first floor until 2 a.m. Fortified by the expectation of the Master's recovery, she spent day after day in that way. She lived there so silently, so invisibly, that many of the regular visitors did not know that she was living there at all and carrying the responsibility for the most important service to the Master. So it's that reading between the lines there. It's always amazing that Holy Mother's quarters always seemed to be so makeshift, and she had to do all the cooking. So she was literally starting a little fire, and doing an outdoor barbecue out there on that veranda, cooking the Master's rice and dal and all the farina pudding and the things that he was able to eat in those last days with his throat cancer. And her modesty, where she was raised as a village girl. This was 100 and some years ago, raised as a village woman who was not to be seen by a man, certainly not to engage in company with unknown men. And yet she just adjusted, made it work. And it seems like she was always adjusting and making it work. And yet you never read of a bad attitude. You never read of any kind of unkindness from her. She was really in charge of her senses, really in charge of her passions. This is how they knew her greatness, and how slowly that veil of understanding was removed, and people recognized her as an incarnation of the Divine Mother. Because of that equanimous love that never failed, there was never an exception to it. She was always ready to serve, always concerned about all the devotees, as her practice was to be the mother of the world, the mother of the universe. And the sweetness of her life really is comforting when you view it that way, that she also is a hole through which the divine can be seen. That she brings out the aspects of love in the feminine, which is that incredible patience, that incredible endurance, that incredible what would you say? Unsupposing. Is that the word? That she just is so kind and so gentle and so mild, so willing to be in the background, that you would never, like the writer said there, you would never even have noticed her around, because she was just so quiet and yet so effective, so caring. Dr. Sarkar diagnosed the Master's condition as terminal cancer and continued to treat him with homeopathic medicine. The devotees consulted other doctors, but Ramakrishna's illness became worse. At last, Dr. Sarkar suggested moving him to a suburb where he could escape the pollution and the congested city. The devotees quickly found a spacious garden house in Kasipur and arranged to move the Master there. On the 11th of December, 1885, Ramakrishna left for Kasipur by a horse carriage with Holy Mother. Latu, Kali, and Senor Gopal were also there, or Senior Gopal. His other attendants took another carriage with the household belongings and necessities. At the Kasipur garden house, Holy Mother could move about more freely. The two-story house was in a quiet neighborhood, and its garden comprised about 5 acres of land with trees, flowering plants, and 2 ponds. Ramakrishna occupied a large room on the upper floor, and the Holy Mother stayed in a small room on the ground floor near the staircase. Narendra and some young disciples, here comes Priya, Narendra and some young disciples took up residence in the 2 large rooms on the south of the ground floor, so they could attend to the master around the clock. Swami Sharadananda writes, as before, Holy Mother was in charge of preparing the master's diet. If the doctor prescribed a special diet for the master in addition to regular food, Brother Gopal or another devotee would learn how to prepare it, then teach Holy Mother how to do so. Holy Mother could converse freely only with Brother Gopal and 1 or 2 others. In addition to preparing the master's meals, Holy Mother would carry the food tray to him a little before noon and shortly after sunset and wait until he had finished eating. The master's niece, Lakshmi, was brought to Kasipur to help the Holy Mother cook and to perform other household duties as well as to keep her company. In addition, some of the women devotees who had regularly visited the master in Dakshineshwar began to come to Kasipur and to stay with the Holy Mother for a few hours, or sometimes for 1 or 2 days. After a week, the whole arrangement worked smoothly. And so you can know that she was cooking for everyone also, not wouldn't be just for the master. She was making the special meals for the master, but just according to her own heart, she would be cooking and taking care of snacks and tea and whatnot for everybody that came to visit and all the people that stayed there. And again, this room that she's in, it's a room for sure, but it's also quite a small room, a little bit cramped, especially if you're doing some cooking and all of the preparation in there, because that would be where you had to keep all of your supplies as well. And she would come out, and the staircase up to the master's room was quite steep and long. She would have to run up and down that constantly, taking care of him. And then not too far, literally across the foyer from the bottom of those stairs, is where the room was that the young men were staying when they came to visit, his disciples. That's the room where Swami Vivekananda had his spiritual experience, where he went, Ramakrishna gave him samadhi. It's kind of funny because Vivekananda bothered him for a long time. I want samadhi. I want to experience samadhi. And so finally in that room, he gets it. And as he's coming down from samadhi, he can only find, this sounds so weird to read to us, but he could only find his head. He couldn't find the rest of his body. And he was calling out for help. And one of the disciples ran up to Maharaj, to Ramakrishna's room, and said to him, come help Vivekananda. He can't seem to get things in order to find his body. And Ramakrishna was like, oh, he pestered me for so long for that samadhi. Let him work it out. The master had a very restricted diet. Dr. Sarkar prescribed soft foods such as farina pudding, rice, gruel, milk, barley, vermicelli, palo, which is a custard made from zadori root, and also meat and clam stew, so the master could gain some weight and strength. Anybody surprised by that? When asked to prepare clam stew, Holy Mother objected, remarking the clams were living creatures. How could she kill them? Thereupon the master said, how is that? I must eat the stew and you can't prepare it. Holy Mother made up her mind to carry out his wish. While performing her duty, she had a revelation in which she saw that God alone is both the killer and the killed. However, that clam stew stopped oozing of saliva from the master's mouth. Another day, the master said to her, look, I wish to eat potfuls of khichdi, which is a rice and dal mixture.
So she made meat also, Swamiji?
She prepared meat. I don't know if I'm sure she ate fish. Everybody in Bengal eats fish. And certainly at Holy Mother House, they serve all kinds of, I've had meat served at Holy Mother's house.
What was oozing out of whose mouth?
No, well, he didn't relish it, so he didn't salivate for eating the clam.
Oh God! Okay,
is all she's saying, that he didn't like it, and so he asked for some khichdi, which was probably the illegal food that he wasn't allowed to have because, because of cancer. So householder devotees paid the expenses for the master and the household, and the master's young disciples took responsibility for the nursing, the shopping, and other errands. Holy Mother had to do a great deal of cooking over a wood-burning stove. She also carried the master's noon and evening meals to him. Later, she recalled an accident which happened one day. While living in the Kasipur garden, I was once climbing the steps carrying a big bowl of milk. I felt dizzy and I fell down, and the entire milk spilled on the ground. One of my ankles was badly sprained. Naren and Baburam ran there and took care of me. There was a great inflammation of the foot. The master heard of the accident and said to Baburam, "Well, Baburam, it is a nice mess I'm in now. Who's going to cook my food? Who's going to feed me now?" He was then ill with cancer of the throat and lived mainly on rice gruel and farina pudding. I used to make them and to feed him in his room in the upper story of the house. I had then a ring in my nose. The master touched his nose and made the sign of the ring by making a circle with his finger in order to indicate me. He then said, "Baburam, can you put her," making the sign, "in a basket and carry her on your shoulder to this room?" Naren and Baburam were convulsed with side-splitting laughter. Thus he used to cut jokes with them. After 3 days, the swelling subsided. Then they helped me go upstairs with his meals. So the master having a little fun there. It's interesting. I suspect that him referring to her with a sign was part of the respect, I think, that he showed for her, not using her name directly and certainly not referring to her as his wife, And so it was a sign of the respect between the two of them, the way they talked with each other. But also you see the playfulness of the master here in the way he was dealing with her. Can you go get signing the ring in her nose? The young disciples renounced their homes and surrendered themselves to Ramakrishna. Holy Mother was the only witness to the following incident, which reveals how the master protected his disciples. One evening, Naranjan and a few other disciples decided to get juice from a date palm near the southern boundary of the garden. The master was told nothing about this. When it was dark, Naranjan and the others walked toward the tree. A short time later, Holy Mother saw the master running down the steps and through the door. She wondered, how is this possible? How can one who needs help, even to change his position in bed, run like an arrow? She could not believe her eyes, so she went to the master's room to see if he was there. He was not. In great consternation, she looked all around, but could not find him. With much apprehension, Holy Mother returned to her room. After a while, the Holy Mother saw the master running swiftly back to his room. She then went to him and asked about what she had seen. He replied, "Oh, you noticed that. You see, the boys who have come here are all young. They were proceeding merrily to drink the juice of a date palm in the garden. I saw a black cobra there. It is ferocious, and it might have bitten them all. The boys did not know this, so I went there by a different route to drive it away. I told the snake, 'Don't come here again.' The master asked her not to tell the others about this." Holy Mother was frightened when she saw that people had begun worshiping the master as God. She remembered that he had told her that when people regarded him as God, he would soon leave his body. She recalled, when the master was lying ill in Kasipur, some devotees brought some offerings to Mother Kali at Dakshineshwar, but instead of offering them to her, they offered them to the master's picture there, and then partook of the prasad. On hearing about this, the master said, "Just see, the devotees did the wrong thing. All these things were brought for the Divine Mother, but they offered everything here," meaning to himself. "I was scared to death. I thought, he is suffering from this dangerous disease. Who knows what will happen? What a calamity! Why did they do such a thing?" Late that night, the master told me, "You will see later that people will worship my picture in their homes. This is surely going to happen. I mean it. I swear it. Don't be worried. This was the only day I heard him using the first person pronoun with reference to himself. Usually he would speak of himself not as I or me, but would point to himself and say this case or this place. At Kasipur, the master distributed ochre cloths and rosaries to 12 disciples. Sorry. The 12 disciples, excuse me? Somebody say something? Okay. All right. At Kasipur, the master distributed ochre cloth, that's that orange cloth that the monks wear, and rosaries to 12 disciples, and thus laid the foundation for his monastic order. Another day, the master asked his disciples to go out and to beg for food. It is an ancient Indian custom for the monks to live on alms. Begging helps eradicate the ego and teaches one to depend solely on God. Narendra, Naranjan, Kali, Hutko Gopal, they first went to Holy Mother and asked for alms, chanting this hymn to the goddess Annapurna. O Parvati, goddess of food, whose store is overflowing, O beloved Shankara, give me alms so that I may attain knowledge and wisdom. So this is the Ramakrishna order, how it started just now. And that going out for begging of alms is still part of the tradition. For 3 days after you take sannyas, everybody has to beg food. And so we go out 2 by 2 out into the city and go from door to door. And you're not allowed here, let's see if I can remember the rules. You're not allowed to visit more than 7 homes. So if you haven't gotten any food by the 7th home, you go hungry that day. You're not allowed to take food from more than 5 places. So once you've hit 5 places that have given you something, you quit begging. And then we would go and return to the compound. All the new monks were kind of living in a camp, separate and apart from the rest of the monastery. And when you returned, you had this just a square cloth. It was probably, I don't know, that can hardly see between my screen there, but probably like that, maybe 2 feet wide and like 4 feet long. And you would tie a knot on the one end, and so it would drape over your shoulder. And anything that you were offered went into that cloth, which is super messy, because people would offer you some dal, which is a bean soup, and you would just put it in there with the rice. And if somebody gave you some sweets, some candies or whatever, they would go right in there with it. Or somebody gave you some potatoes or some vegetables, it all goes into this cloth. And of course it's dripping out of the bottom of the cloth all down the side of your robes. You're walking around. It's really messy.
It's not hygienic, Swamiji.
Oh, well, that's a given. But I mean, of course, knowing me, that I had to do something mischievous. I went and got 4 little Tupperware containers from the kitchen at the university, and I put them in my cloth. And the next day I went around, and when I went to the places and begged, and they came out with a ladle of dal, I would pull out one of the little containers and put it in. It wasn't traditional at all. I got a lot of laughter. A lot of them thought that was pretty hilarious, but it was great. But the thing is when we got back to the compound, everything went in one pile. They had this giant brass plate, which was probably like 3 or 4 feet in diameter, and everybody would just dump their stuff on it. So there were sweets and vegetables and different types of dal and rice and all the fried anything, all the stuff that everybody had gotten would just be in this big mound of food on this table. And we would all go around and we'd get a leaf plate to eat on. So literally a banana leaf. And you go over there and you just take handfuls of however much you thought you could eat, and then go sit down and eat this food just all mixed together like that. And we did that for 3 days. And after the meal, after lunch was actually sometimes after, but actually it was more before everybody got back. As people were returning, it took about an hour or so for everybody to get back from their begging. But while everybody, the ones who had already made it back, they would pull out the harmonium and they'd be singing devotional songs, and we'd be dancing around the harmonium, singing these wonderful Bengali devotional songs. And it was so much fun. There was such a sweet camaraderie between us because we had all just gone through a 10-day series of rituals in order to take our final vows together. And so we had been through a lot and an amazing experience together. And there really was a beautiful sense of brotherhood and bond that was very strong between us in those 10 days. And after the 10 days were over, we kind of dispersed. I went wandering in the Himalayas with a couple of the brothers that had taken vows with me. And we went up there and wandered in the hills for a few days, which to wander in the Himalayas as a monk was incredible. I remember the first time that I did it, I went wandering when I wasn't a monk. I wasn't even a Vedantist the first time. I just went hiking up through the mountains. And it was funny to see the difference of experience, that the first time I went hiking up there, I was just a tourist enjoying hiking like I do here in the Rockies, just beautiful, incredible scenery. And that's how I saw it. The second time that I went doing that, actually, I think the second or third time, was after I had taken my vows. And so I was in my robes and wandering through the mountains up there. And the difference of experience was unbelievable to me, because I realized or knew as I was walking in those mountains that I was part of the mountains, that I was part of a story that they have been supporting for 10,000 years, maybe, where people have renounced and wandered to the mountains for the solitude, for their prayer and practice. And to be walking on those same mountains, chasing the same ideal as those monks had for thousands of years before me, was such an overwhelming experience of bliss for me at the time. I really couldn't believe that it was real. I couldn't believe that I was experiencing this, that I was part of it. I remember we were walking along and there was a clearing up ahead and there was a man, an old man. God, I mean, this guy looked like he must have been 100. He had two sticks that he was walking with, and he had 4 goats with him. And the goats were eating the leaves out of trees as we were walking, and some grass where they could find it. But when he saw us, there was 4 of us monks walking together. When he saw us from quite a distance, he laid down flat on the side on the ground, just off of the side of the path, laid there with his face in the dirt, as a bow, as an honor, until all 4 of us had walked by before he got up. And after we had walked by and gotten a distance away, he got up, gathered his goats together, and kept walking his goats. But just to see that demonstration of honor on his part, and to know that he was honoring the vows, the ideal that we represented. It was a very, very deep experience. I mean, it was a really powerful thing to experience. And, even in that, you could see the agelessness of what was happening, that this has been going on for thousands of years. That's one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my life. What is this kind of devotion? I remember when I went to Bangkok, again, before I was a monk, I stayed in literally a bamboo hut on the beach on this little island called Koh Samet. I think that's what it was called. Yeah, Koh Samet. And it was one of the lesser traveled islands. And so I woke up one morning just at dawn, and there were these 3 Buddhist monks walking along the beach. And this old woman came out of her hut and went over, and she did the same thing. She completely prostrated with quite an effort on the beach in front of these 3 young monks, and then got up and offered each one of them an egg in their begging bags. And then she bowed to them, and they blessed her, put their hands on her head. And that was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. And I laid there almost crying, because I thought of how beautiful how beautiful that interaction was, the gentleness and the well-wishing of the monks who depended on the devotion and the love of this old woman. And I knew that she didn't have much money. She was living in a little hut on the beach, and she gave what she had. And that experience of monasticism, that honor for monasticism in the East, is an incredible thing to observe because of the absolute sincerity of it. None of our criticisms or of our personal ways of thinking it even come to mind when you actually see it, because it is such a pure act, such a beautiful sign of devotion and love and respect. Just a wonderful thing. Very glad I got to see that. Very happy to see that. There's lots of stories like that, actually. I'll turn this into a story hour. All right. So these monks go out to ask for alms, and the merciful Holy Mother, taken by surprise, gave them a handful of cooked rice. They then went from door to door begging for food. Some people gave them rice, some gave vegetables or fruit, some scolded them. Oh yeah, definitely. I got scolded a few times myself. You young fellows, are you not ashamed to dress yourselves as beggars and to beg for food? Go away, get a job. Some remarked, these young men are robbers. They have come to get information so that they can return at night and rob us. The young disciples endured all kinds of verbal abuse. When at last they returned to the master with their alms, he was very pleased. Holy Mother cooked a portion of the food after partaking of it, and the master remarked, food obtained by begging is pure. It is not defiled by anyone's selfish desire. I am very pleased to eat it today. Even us, we would always send over a bowl of our begged food. We would send it to the president's lodge, so that he could have some of the begged food also. It's considered to be very holy to eat that, as it's true prasad. And so, but her mentioning of that insult, I endured that a couple of times. Especially, I wasn't the only white monk. There was Arapationanda, who also from California, from Hollywood. He was also taking his vows there at the same time, but we were split up on the begging. And they purposely sent me with two Bengali boys because I didn't speak a word of Bengali and had no idea at all what I was getting into. And those two boys thought that it would be funny to send me alone to the house. So they would send me up to beg by myself at the door, and they would stand back just out of sight and just laugh their heads off, because I would have to go up and try and do the chant, and then they'd come to the door. And when they'd see a white guy standing there in Garawa with begging for food, those people did not know what to do. They did not know what to think. They sat there, they would look at me, and they had to make a choice, because I represented two opposite ideals to them. As a white American, I was representing wealth and pleasure and enjoyment and freedom and all that kind of stuff. That's one ideal that I was representing to them. And then I was dressed in Garawa, with a shaven head, begging for food. And I could see their eyes as they wrestled with what to do with these two opposite ideals being crashed together literally right in front of them. And they had to make up their mind. Either I was a charlatan or I was a saint. It's like, to them, there was no other option. It was like, either he's a charlatan or he's a saint. And I never knew which one they were going to come down on, which side they were going to land on. And when they decided charlatan, I would get an earful, about my laziness and my begging and wasting my life. And why would I ever become a monk? And, surely being from the West, you should know better, and all kinds of things like that. But the most of them, the vast majority of them, were incredibly touching experiences. I remember I was in a Muslim part of town, and naturally I got some abuse for that, because they don't really have that ideal of monasticism, and so they would call me out on it, not in a mean way, but in the way that they thought that they were correcting me. And I went to this one little row of, you can't call them houses, they were rooms, and the rooms were probably about the size of a normal bathroom in an American house. And this woman, she only had a curtain for her front door. And I went and, it took me a minute to figure out I couldn't knock on anything. So I started my chant, and she came to the door with a baby on her hip. And I could see in her room, she had a cot, which was just kind of a woven fabric cot, and then one little box on the floor, and then a little built-in shelf up on the wall. And I saw, when she went back in her house, she was frantically searching for something to give me. And I knew that she didn't have much of anything, from that. And I was sitting there and I was just praying to talk or to God. Because I was so embarrassed and so ashamed, because this woman who clearly had nothing, lived in this tiny room with a child. And it was clear there was no man around, for it, because the cot was just a very small cot. Anyway, she managed to find in that little box, she had rummaged through it, she found a small little handful of puffed rice, and she put it in a little bag and gave that to me. And when I took that, I was crying because it was so hard, because I was like, look at me, I'm a fat, overfed Westerner, who's enjoyed life and all of the riches of this side of the world. And here I am taking what maybe this person's only food, for me. And I was it was so hard for me to take that food from her. And I really grew in my faith at that day, because I was like, God, I could not take this food for myself. I cannot take this in my name. I said, I can only take this in your name, that this is an offering to you from this woman. And it broke me. I really was disturbed for quite a while after that, just seeing that and understanding, trying to wrap my head around that whole experience was quite a challenge, but I understood more what it was to be a monk because of that, what it was to renounce.
Maharaj, is that to let go of your ego that they make you do that, to beg?
Yes. Yeah. It's to help break the ego of the monk, and it's an offering to God, an opportunity for a direct offering to God on the part of the devotee, to take care of somebody that's renounced everything for the sake of love, for the sake of knowledge. So yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. It's, there's a lot of funny stories too, because the devotees at Bellarmine, they know what day the monks are going out to do their begging, and there'll be crowds of them around all of the entrances to the campus, to the Bellarmine campus. And the monks, we don't want to go and just stand at the gate and have all this good food just put in our bag and then go back to the thing. We want to go out and do the real thing, to really experience the begging. And so we would literally put our shutters up over our head, put our arms together like this, and just run through this crowd of devotees who are trying to push Roscolas in your shirt and under your shutter and in your bag, whatever way that you could do it. And I remember one day I had outrun the group, and there was this woman who kept running after me, didn't stop. And so I was like, I felt stupid. I was like, okay, I can't just keep running from this woman. That's ridiculous. So I stopped, and she came and she was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. She says, I'm here just for today. I come every year from Mysore. She had traveled from South India all the way up to Bellarmine for one day to offer food to the new monks. She would do it every year. And she hadn't gotten any of us that day because we had all outrun her. And so when I stopped, she had already put a Roscola in my cheddar all the way. But when I stopped, she gave me the rest of the food, and I just was touched even by that. I was like, oh my God, you traveled all the way from South India for this, to give me some food. So I was, again, you have to understand that it's not yourself. Nobody would travel from South India to feed me. And so it was again a reminder of what my life was then. There was no me there anymore. This was an ideal that I represented. This was, an ideal that people were honoring and worshiping and feeding and caring for. It was an amazing experience, really a beautiful, beautiful and challenging experience time. Ramakrishna's physical condition deteriorated quickly. It soon became hard for him to swallow any food, and the medicine was ineffective. Holy Mother resolved to seek divine help. She left for the famous Tarakeshwar Shiva temple to get a remedy for her husband's illness. Lakshmi and a maidservant went with her. She later said, I went to Tarakeshwar to lay down before Lord Shiva without food and drink for 2 days. I prayed, I kept vigil, but got no response from the Lord. On the second night, I was startled by a sound, a cracking sound, as if someone were striking a heap of baked earth pots with a heavy cudgel. I got up, and this thought came to my mind. Who is one's husband? Who are one's relatives? For whose sake am I about to commit suicide here? All of my attachments were completely cut asunder, and my mind was filled with renunciation. I groped my way through the darkness to the back of the temple, where the holy water offered to Shiva was accumulated in a basin. I splashed that water on my eyes and face and drank it. My throat was dry because I had been fasting. I felt a little refreshed. The next day I returned to Kasipur. The moment the master saw me, he asked, well, did you get anything? Then flexing his right thumb, he said, nothing is real. Isn't that so? That's an amazing story right there. That's an amazing story. That's that absolute renunciation. I mean, look at that. She's laying down, willing to die in order to get help from Shiva, from God. And then instead, Shiva gives her an even greater gift, Who is one's husband? Who are one's relatives? For whose sake am I about to commit suicide here? All my attachments were completely cut asunder, and my mind was filled with renunciation. I groped my way through the darkness to the back of the temple, where the holy water offered to Shiva was accumulated in a basin. I splashed that water on my eyes and face and drank it. One day the master told me that he had had a dream. An elephant was trying to get medicine for him. It was digging in the earth for his medicine when Gopal woke him up. Then he asked me whether I had any dream. Once I saw Mother Kali with her neck tilted to one side. I asked her why she stood that way. She replied, because of his having that trouble, pointing to the master's wound. I too am ill. I think that's something that we don't often think about. We enjoy the presence of God within us. We enjoy that image of the beloved that's stamped in the shrine of the heart. And we enjoy that bliss, and we enjoy that presence, and we enjoy that oneness. But we don't think that in all of those years when we are unaware of the presence of the beloved within, that he was enduring all of our pain, enduring all of our troubles, all of our thoughts, all of our experiences, vices, and our virtues, that God was there, is there, because really there is no you here. That's why Shiva is telling Holy Mother, or when Ramakrishna said to Holy Mother, nothing is real, isn't it so? Meaning that they're seers. So they have the ability to see that presence of God everywhere. And so there's no you. That's the understanding, the final realization that everything is God and God alone. And so what does that mean? That means that we've dragged the poor Lord through all of our nasty stuff, through all of our lives, through all of our pains. And it's actually God who is experiencing this life. You call it yours because of egoism, because you have a sense of separateness and apartness. But in reality, it is God, going through all of that ignorance and all of that learning and all of that hurting and all of that pain. And that's
So
an amazing.
Maharaj, does
Uh-huh.
that mean God is suffering with us?
In some sense, yes. The suffering, he feels the suffering. Absolutely. To the degree that we feel it, he feels it, and probably even a little bit more sharply because he sees its nature. But he's full of dispassion. It's like Thakur, when he saw the snake in his mind, could jump out of his deathbed and run down the stairs. They have an ability to raise their mind above this plane. Thakur could put dying on hold for a minute, run down the stairs and out to the lake and get rid of the snake, and then run back in and climb back into bed and continue on dying. So it's like that. Yes, at one level they experience the pain very personally and excruciatingly, but they can also rise above it. But see, in our case, it's interesting because they've come down to a level to where they have to even talk about those things. It's not like anybody else is in you. There's God alone in you. God alone is living this life. And the ignorance that is being experienced makes God feel like he is you, makes him take your name, So you are God in ignorance, cut off from knowledge of herself. You see, that's the final realization. Final realization is that you've just put on a costume, that the Lord has put on a costume. He's put on an ego and limited his thinking to a mind, to a small mind, and carried on this life thinking that you are you. So you are that. That's what that means. That means that even right now, you are God, but you're God kind of in a twist. God doesn't know who he is, who she is right now, and is living your life. And will find that freedom from this bondage, from this smallness at some point. And that will be your realization. But there is no you to experience your realization. So that's God realizing God. So here we see Kali saying exactly this in a dream, that she is standing there, with her head tilted to one side. And in the dream, the disciple asks her, "Why are you standing like that?" And she says, "See his condition, his neck, the throat cancer. I too am feeling that. I too am experiencing that." Holy Mother described this vision in detail to Yogan Ma, who later related the story. When Sri Ramakrishna was gravely ill at the Kasipur garden house, Holy Mother was stricken with grief. One day she had a vision. A black girl with long hair appeared and sat near her. Realizing that it was Mother Kali, she exclaimed, "Oh, you've come." "Yes, I've come from Dakshineshwar." After further conversation, Holy Mother observed that the girl's neck was bent to one side. She asked, "What has happened to your neck?" Mother Kali, "Well, I have a sore throat." Holy Mother, "My goodness, the master has a sore throat, and you have it?" Mother Kali, "That is true." Thus, Holy Mother was made to understand that the Divine Mother and Sri Ramakrishna were one and the same. And there is no distinction. In God has come many times, and this time he came as three people. Came as Holy Mother, Ramakrishna, and Swami Vivekananda all at the same time. And as you fall in love with them, as you get to know their lives and understand the depth and the character that each one of them had, and you see that each one of them cover a particular spectrum, of light, so that you have to take all three of them to get a fuller idea of God. That ultimately God is manifesting through 7 billion people, and all of us are living lives of love. Unfortunately, we're interpreting that love through the mind, body, and senses. So our love is very narrow and focused. It doesn't go out equanimously like a Jesus or a Ramakrishna or a Holy Mother. Their love went out to everyone equally. They had no ego to crimp it, to focus it, to limit it. That's what I'd like to say. And so, but we see in these great souls where the ignorance hasn't, God, the ignorance of the divine has not been fully covered. I mean, the ignorance has not fully covered the eyes of the divine. So Ramakrishna could know who he was. Mother could know who she was. Swami Vivekananda could know who he was. But in order to teach, and in order to empathize, and in order to have their divine play, which is where they get the name of the book from, they live in ignorance to experience our lives, and so that they can teach us, so that they can be these kinds of beautiful, inspirational examples to us. And it's quite wonderful if you sit here and think that all of us is just a little twist of God, lost in ignorance at the moment. You can see where the love that we have for each other comes from. You can see where the compassion comes from. You can see where our enjoyment of each other's company
Swami,
comes from.
Swami, I don't understand why you say a little twist. I mean, are we or aren't we? Or like, is it just a little spark of the big fire? I'm confused.
Yeah, well, as I see it, I say little twist because I always perceive, I don't have I'll use my shirt. No, I can't get up high enough. If you take a towel and lay it over your hand, right? That towel is the Atman. That's God, okay? And you lay it over your fingers, and then imagine that you took a little rubber band, you push the towel over the top of your finger and put a little rubber band around that nub, and then you put a little rubber band around this nub, and you put a little rubber band around this nub. You'll have one towel, but you'll have 5 little nubs that are cut off from the hole by a little rubber band. That little rubber band is ignorance. And that little rubber band ties or cuts God off into an individual. That's what I call the little twist. And each one of those little fingers sticking through made of the Atman, but with a rubber band of ignorance on it. Each one of them can play and talk and act as individuals and be perceived as individuals. But if someone were to grab both ends of that towel and pull, those rubber bands would all pop off the 5 fingers, and the 5 separate fingers would no longer be individuals. That would now be just a singular towel. That's sort of how it seems in my mind, that God has become 7 billion fingers, rubber banded in ignorance under
Is
a
it
very
like
big
with
towel.
the waves and the ocean?
Waves in the ocean is another example of that. Yes,
Thanks.
absolutely.
Swami,
And you, yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
no worries.
So 7 billion fingers. So
Right.
we all are expected, as the Vedantists teach, and we all are. We will at some point all realize that we are not the finger, that we are the Atman that is isolated on the finger, that we isolate ourselves.
Yes.
Is there any kind of expectation that we will all once be like there will be no more fingers? And what about the new fingers that are getting created by being born again? I mean, obviously we weren't 7 billion human beings even a century ago. So what's the process of us all eventually in maybe 7 billion years time realizing that we're all just one Brahman?
Yeah. A good question. I'm going to take us a little bit out of the material world. You're asking that question with a firm belief in the material world. Imagine it more like your dream at night. Your dream, you're in the material world seemingly, and there can be many people in your dream experiencing that dream with you, and you will see them all as being individual and separate from you, even though each one of them is a piece of your own mind manifesting as a separate person with a separate ego. And so when you wake up in the morning and somebody comes and says, how many people were in your dream last night? There could have been 7 billion, but is that a point? Because there was never 7 billion people in that dream. There was one sleeper, there was you, and that was it. But you had in that dream manifested 7 billion people, or however many, in your dream, all of them made of your own self, your own mind stuff. And so if from within the dream, we're asking the question, well, what about all 7 billion of us? When we have this realization, what's happening? But in that dream, only one person gets to have realization, and that's the sleeper. And when he wakes up, what happens to the other 7 billion? Well, they woke up as well, right? Because they were all you. There wasn't 7 billion people in there. They all woke up as you, and you returned to that one sleeper without a second, as it were. And so while we're in the dream, while we're here, each one of us is living in our own mind. We don't live in a world, we live in a mind, and we live in an individual mind. And the world that we think we perceive is completely created by our own mind as a set of symbols for the information that's coming in through our senses. And so really only one person ever realizes God, and that is God. The realization is that there was no individual me in the dream, that I was everybody, that I was everything. And so each of us has this universe, and that universe, upon realization, disappears. The 7 billion people that you count in your mind that belong to this, you say it's an external world, but the sages say there is no interior and exterior. The whole world is within your mind. And when you realize God, you just simply, that entire universe ceases, and you come to a knowledge of its nature. You come to knowledge of the one without a second. So it's like that. Now, I don't know that really explains much, and I'm not sure that we could explain things at that level. It's a very high realization, a very, very pure mind that comes to that knowing. So, but as far as what I've cobbled together from the scriptures and from life, from being, that's how I've come to understand it. Does that help?
Yeah, it gives a little better understanding. We can't be judging it by our own limited minds. We have to take ourselves out of that, and
yeah,
the knowledge will come.
Yes, the knowledge is in you. The knowledge is there, but you have to silence mind. You have to silence ego, which is very difficult. But once you get the ego out of the way, the ego is the veil that keeps us asleep, that keeps us from knowing that we are one in that. And it's also important to know that all of these questions are asked from within the dream. If you're dreaming, you're asleep dreaming, and you're able to fly. And so let's say the dream becomes about you flying, and you start to study the physics of flight. How did I fly? How do I fly? My wings are this big, my body weighs this much, my wingspan is this much. And you go on figuring all of this mathematics out in your dream about how it is that you're able to fly. And in your dream, that makes sense. Why, figuring all that out seems very important. It's very high science. But then you wake up and you've got all these, you don't have any notes. You don't have anything from the dream. But are you concerned about how you could fly anymore? No, not at all. Because you're like, it's a dream. I can do anything in a dream. And so the question that seems pertinent within the dream becomes a non-question when the dream is over, when the sleeper awakens. And so for us, a lot of these questions that we approach, that we have from the scriptures and from our practice and from what we're trying to accomplish, they're from the perspective of the dreamed and not from the perspective of the dreamer. And so most of these questions will just become silly questions once we reach the realization it was a dream. It wasn't real in the sense of it disappeared when you awoke. So it had no inherent reality in and of itself. It depended entirely on you for its projection, for its reality. And so that's why a lot of spiritual questions, they're not satisfyingly answered because they don't make sense outside of the dream. And we're talking about an ideal outside of the dream. A dream of a land where the one is awake and no longer dreaming himself to be 7 billion people. Like that. So this is that realization. I like to think when Ramakrishna had his realization in the Kali temple, he went that day when he got up and grabbed the knife out of Mother Kali's arm, was going to cut his own throat because he was so desperate for God and God was nowhere to be found. And suddenly he says that he froze and the walls of the temple fell away and he saw an infinite ocean of light, of consciousness. And he said he saw these raging waves of bliss in this ocean. And these waves were rushing toward him with such a ferocity that they threatened to overpower his very sense of I, his very sense of being. And then they do. And he says, I saw nothing. And beyond that, I cannot speak. There's nothing can be said. And so I like to think that every one of those waves of bliss in this ocean of consciousness that he observed were individuals who were popping, who were coming to their realization. And so it's God who experiences her own realization, her own bliss over and over and over again through our own realization. Each one of us dream folk as we wake up to the elation of truth. That is God's experience. We don't actually experience realization because realization is the understanding that we never existed. But what we find is our greater existence itself, our greater love, a pure love without condition, and a greater wisdom, an infinite wisdom, spontaneously available to us. So we wake up to that overwhelming reality, and that is the bliss of God. That's the bliss of the divine, in all of that. Oh gosh, it's 7:07. All right, let's stop here for tonight. And